In the rich tapestry of Yoruba spirituality, the concept of Ebo represents one of the most fundamental practices for maintaining harmony between the physical and spiritual realms. As documented by renowned scholar Pierre Verger in his extensive research on Yoruba traditions, Ebo is not merely a ritual offering but a sophisticated spiritual technology designed to restore balance when life forces become misaligned. The word Ebo itself carries profound meaning within Yoruba cosmology. It encompasses offerings, sacrifices, and ritual cleansings that serve as bridges between the human world, Aye, and the divine realm, Run. According to Juana Elbain dos Santos's anthropological studies, these practices represent a complex system of spiritual communication that has been refined over. Understanding when to perform Ebo requires deep spiritual sensitivity and recognition of specific signs that manifest in our daily lives. The Yoruba worldview, as explained by Reginaldo Prandi in his comprehensive works on Afro-Brazilian religions, emphasizes that humans exist within a delicate ecosystem of spiritual forces. When these forces become imbalanced, specific symptoms begin to appear in our physical, emotional, and social experiences. Traditional Yoruba communities have always recognized that spiritual intervention through Ebo becomes necessary when certain patterns. These patterns, passed down through generations of Babalawo and Iyelorishas, serve as early warning systems that alert us to spiritual disturbances requiring immediate attention. The wisdom keepers understood that ignoring these signs could lead to more severe spiritual, physical, and material consequences. In contemporary times, many people find themselves disconnected from these ancient wisdom traditions, yet the spiritual laws that govern human existence remain unchanged. The signs that indicate the need for Ebo continue to manifest, often in ways that modern individuals might attribute to bad luck, stress, or coincidence, when in reality, they represent calls for spiritual intervention. Chapter 2. The Spiritual Architecture of Warning Sign. The Yoruba understanding of spiritual communication operates through a sophisticated system of signs and symbols that manifest in the physical. These signs, according to traditional teachings preserved by scholars like Wande Abimbola, represent the language through which the Orishas and spiritual forces communicate their guidance and warnings to human beings. When spiritual imbalance occurs, it creates ripples that extend beyond the individual into their immediate environment and relationship. The ancient Yoruba recognized that spiritual disturbance rarely remains contained, but instead spreads like ripples in water, affecting every aspect of a person's existence. This understanding forms the foundation for recognizing when intervention through Ebo becomes necessary. The manifestation of these warning signs follows patterns that have been observed and documented for centuries. Traditional diviners, as noted in the works of William Bascom on Ifa divination, were trained to recognize these patterns and interpret their spiritual significance. The signs typically appear in clusters rather than isolation, creating a tapestry of symptoms that, when properly understood, reveal the underlying spiritual causes. What makes these signs particularly significant is their persistence and their tendency to escalate when ignored. Unlike random occurrences or temporary setbacks, the signs indicating need for Ebo demonstrate consistent patterns that worsen over time without proper spiritual intervention. This escalation serves as nature's way of ensuring that spiritual imbalance receives the attention it requires. Modern practitioners and scholars like Ronilda Iakemi Ribeiro have documented how these traditional signs continue to manifest in contemporary settings, adapting to modern lifestyles while maintaining their essential characteristics. Understanding these adaptations becomes crucial for recognizing when ancient spiritual solutions remain relevant to modern challenges. The 5 primary signs we will explore represent the most universally recognized indicators across different Yoruba traditions and their diaspora manifestations. Each sign carries specific spiritual significance and points toward particular types of spiritual work required for restoration. Chapter 3. Sign 1. Persistent blockages in life. Progress. The first and perhaps most common sign indicating the need for Ebo manifests as persistent blockages that prevent normal life progress. These blockages, known in Yoruba tradition as Ed, create invisible barriers that frustrate efforts and prevent the natural flow of positive opportunities and experiences. Unlike temporary setbacks or challenges that everyone experiences, these spiritual blockages demonstrate specific characteristics that distinguish them from ordinary life difficulties. They typically manifest as patterns where efforts that should logically succeed consistently fail, opportunities that appear promising suddenly disappear, and doors that should open remain mysteriously closed. According to traditional Yoruba understanding, as documented by researchers like John Mason in his studies of Yoruba spiritual practices, these blockages often result from spiritual debts, ancestral issues, or interference from negative spiritual forces. The blockages serve as protective mechanisms that prevent individuals from moving forward until underlying spiritual issues are addressed. One of the most telling aspects of spiritual blockages is their tendency to affect multiple areas of life simultaneously. While ordinary challenges typically remain confined to specific domains, spiritual blockages create systemic problems that impact career, relationships, health, and financial well-being concurrently. This multidimensional impact serves as a clear indicator that the root cause operates at a spiritual rather than material level. The persistence of these blockages, despite sincere efforts and appropriate actions taken in the physical realm, provides another crucial diagnostic criterion. When individuals find themselves working harder, yet achieving less, when their best efforts consistently produce minimal results, and when circumstances seem to conspire against their progress, spiritual intervention through Igbo becomes necessary. Traditional practitioners recognize that attempting to overcome spiritual blockages through purely material means often proves futile and may even worsen the situation. The proper response involves acknowledging the spiritual dimension of the challenge and seeking appropriate ritual intervention to clear the obstructed pathway. Chapter 4. Sign 2. Recurring negative patterns in relationships. The second significant sign indicating the need for Igbo appears as recurring negative patterns within personal relationships. These patterns, which traditional Yoruba spirituality recognizes as indicators of spiritual imbalance, manifest as destructive cycles that repeat, despite conscious efforts to change them. Relationship patterns that require spiritual intervention typically demonstrate several distinctive characteristics. They tend to repeat across different relationships and contexts, suggesting that the root cause travels with the individual rather than being circumstantial. These patterns often involve misunderstanding, conflicts, betrayals, or separations that follow similar scripts regardless of the specific people involved. According to the spiritual psychology documented in Yoruba traditions, as analyzed by scholars like Oyeronke Oyewumi, relationships serve as mirrors that reflect our spiritual condition. When spiritual forces become imbalanced, these imbalances manifest through the quality and patterns of our interpersonal connections. The relationships become vehicles through which spiritual lessons and corrections attempt to emerge. One particularly telling aspect of relationship patterns requiring Igbo involves their tendency to escalate, despite good intentions from all parties involved. Conversations that begin peacefully suddenly turn into arguments. Misunderstandings that should be easily resolved become major conflict, and people who initially seem compatible discover irreconcilable differences without clear cause. The spiritual dimension of these relationship challenges often becomes apparent through their timing and intensity. They frequently occur during important life transitions, before significant opportunities, or when individuals are making progress in other areas of their lives. This timing suggests that the relationship difficulties serve as spiritual tests or obstacles designed to prevent forward movement until underlying issues are addressed. Traditional Yoruba wisdom recognizes that certain relationship patterns indicate interference from spiritual forces that require ritual cleansing and balancing. The Igbo practices specifically designed for relationship harmony work to clear negative spiritual influences and restore the natural flow of love, respect, and understanding between people. Chapter 5. Sign 3. Unexplained physical and mental fatigue. The third major sign calling for spiritual Igbo manifests as persistent physical and mental fatigue that cannot be explained by lifestyle factors or medical conditions. This type of spiritual fatigue, recognized in Yoruba traditions as ROME, spiritual weariness, differs qualitatively from ordinary tiredness and fails to respond to conventional rest and recovery methods. Spiritual fatigue typically presents as a deep exhaustion that seems to emanate from the core of one's being rather than from physical exertion. Individuals experiencing this condition often describe feeling drained even after adequate sleep, experiencing difficulty concentrating despite good mental health, and finding that activities which previously energized them now feel overwhelming and depleting. The diagnostic criteria for spiritual fatigue, as understood in traditional Yoruba healing practices documented by researchers like Babatunde Lawal, include the fatigue's resistance to conventional treatment and its association with other spiritual signs. Unlike medical, spiritual weariness often intensifies during certain times of day, specific lunar phases, or in particular locations, suggesting sensitivity to spiritual rather than physical factors. Another characteristic feature of spiritual fatigue involves its impact on one's connection to joy and enthusiasm. While physical tiredness typically improves with rest and recovery, spiritual fatigue seems to drain the life force itself, leaving individuals feeling disconnected from their natural vitality and passion for life. This disconnection often puzzles those experiencing it, as they cannot identify clear external reasons for their diminished enthusiasm. Traditional practitioners recognize that spiritual fatigue often results from spiritual attacks, energy drainage by negative forces, or the weight of unresolved ancestral issues. The condition indicates that the individual's spiritual protection has been compromised, and that their life force is being depleted faster than it can naturally regenerate. The Igbo practice is designed to address spiritual fatigue, focus on cleansing negative influences, strengthening spiritual protection, and restoring the natural flow of vital energy. These rituals work to seal energy leak, remove spiritual parasite, and reconnect individuals with their source of spiritual vitality. Chapter 6. Sign 4. Unusual dreams and sleep disturbances. The fourth significant sign indicating the need for Igbo appears through unusual dreams and persistent sleep disturbances that carry spiritual significance. In Yoruba cosmology, as documented extensively by scholars like Karen Barber, the dream realm serves as a primary communication channel between the physical and spiritual worlds, making dream patterns crucial indicators of spiritual conditions. Spiritually significant dreams that call for Igbo typically demonstrate several distinctive characteristics that differentiate them from ordinary dreams or stress-related sleep issues. These dreams often feature deceased relatives or ancestors appearing with urgent messages, encounters with spiritual entities or forces, or recurring scenarios that feel more real than typical dream experiences. The quality and intensity of these spiritual dreams usually far exceed normal dream experiences. Individuals often report dreams that feel more vivid than waking life, dreams that leave them feeling emotionally or physically affected upon waking, or dreams that seem to continue themes and narratives across multiple nights. These characteristics suggest that the dreams represent actual spiritual communications, rather than psychological processing. Sleep disturbances associated with spiritual causes typically include difficulty falling asleep due to sensing spiritual presences, waking at specific times, particularly between 3 to 4 a.m., considered spiritually active hour, or experiencing sleep paralysis, accompanied by sensing malevolent entities. These disturbances often resist conventional sleep hygiene practices, and may worsen with attempted relaxation. Traditional Yoruba understanding recognizes that certain dreams serve as warnings about spiritual attacks, calls for attention from ancestral spirits, or previews of potential future events that require spiritual intervention to prevent or modify. The urgency and persistence of these dream messages indicate that spiritual action through Igbo has become necessary. Nightmares featuring spiritual themes, dreams of being chased or attacked by unknown entities, or dreams involving spiritual locations like crossroads, cemeteries, or bodies of water often signal the need for protective spiritual work. These dreams typically increase in frequency and intensity until appropriate spiritual measures are taken. Chapter 7. Sign 5. Financial and material losses. Despite good efforts, the fifth major sign requiring spiritual Igbo manifests as persistent financial and material losses that occur despite reasonable efforts and sound decision-making. These losses, understood in Yoruba tradition as indicators of spiritual interference with one's ori, personal destiny and fortune, demonstrate patterns that distinguish them from ordinary financial challenges or economic downturns. Spiritually caused financial problems typically exhibit characteristics that defy logical explanation. Money seems to disappear faster than expected. Investments that appear sound consistently fail. Business ventures encounter unexpected obstacles, and financial opportunities that seem certain mysteriously evaporate. These patterns suggest interference with the natural flow of prosperity and abundance. According to traditional Yoruba economic spirituality, as studied by researchers like Sandra Barnes in her work on Yoruba religious traditions, financial well-being depends not only on physical efforts, but also on spiritual alignment and protection. When spiritual forces become imbalanced, they can block the channels through which prosperity naturally flows, creating artificial scarcity despite adequate effort and opportunity. One particularly telling aspect of spiritually influenced financial problems involves their timing and seeming randomness. Large unexpected expenses appear just as financial stability is achieved. Business deals fall through at the last moment without clear cause, or equipment and vehicles break down in ways that suggest more than mechanical failure. These synchronicities point toward spiritual, rather than purely material causes. The persistence of financial difficulties despite changing strategies, seeking professional advice, and making sound decisions, provides another diagnostic criterion for spiritual interference. When individuals find that their financial situation continues to deteriorate regardless of their efforts to improve it, spiritual intervention becomes necessary to address the underlying causes. Traditional Yoruba understanding recognizes that financial blockages often result from spiritual debts, ancestral issues affecting family lineages, or intentional spiritual interference from enemies or competitors. The appropriate Igbo practices work to clear these spiritual obstacles and restore the natural flow of prosperity and abundance. Chapter 8. Recognizing the interconnected nature of signs. Understanding the interconnected nature of the 5 primary signs becomes crucial for accurate spiritual diagnosis and effective intervention. Traditional Yoruba wisdom, as preserved in the extensive oral traditions documented by scholars like Karen Barber and Oyeronke Oyewumi, emphasizes that spiritual imbalances rarely manifest through isolated symptoms, but instead create cascading effects across multiple life domains. The appearance of multiple signs simultaneously serves as a strong indicator that spiritual intervention through Igbo has become urgently necessary. When blockages in life progress, coincide with relationship difficulties, financial losses, spiritual fatigue, and disturbing dreams, the convergence suggests a significant spiritual crisis, requiring immediate attention and comprehensive ritual response. Traditional practitioners recognize that the signs often follow predictable progression patterns. Typically, 1 or 2 signs appear first as early warnings, followed by additional symptoms as the spiritual imbalance deepens and spreads. Understanding these progression patterns helps individuals recognize when they are in the early stages of spiritual crisis, allowing for more effective and less intensive intervention. The timing relationships between different signs also provide important diagnostic information. For example, financial losses that begin shortly after unusual dreams, or relationship problems that intensify during periods of spiritual fatigue, suggest specific types of spiritual interference that require targeted ritual approaches. These timing patterns help traditional practitioners select the most appropriate Igbo ceremonies and offerings. Another crucial aspect involves recognizing how the signs amplify each other's effects. Spiritual fatigue makes individuals more vulnerable to relationship conflicts. Financial stress intensifies spiritual sensitivity, leading to disturbing dreams, and life blockages create frustration that attracts additional negative spiritual influences. This amplification effect explains why spiritual problems tend to worsen rapidly without intervention. The geographic and temporal clustering of signs also provides valuable information about their spiritual causes. Signs that worsen in specific locations, during certain times of year, or in connection with particular people or activities, often point toward identifiable sources of spiritual interference that can be addressed through targeted Igbo practices. Chapter 9. The spiritual mechanics of Igbo intervention. Understanding how Igbo works to address spiritual imbalances requires familiarity with fundamental Yoruba concepts about energy, spiritual communication, and the mechanisms through which ritual intervention affects both spiritual and material. Traditional Yoruba science, as documented by scholars like William Bascom and John Pember, views Igbo as a sophisticated technology for spiritual problem solving. The effectiveness of Igbo operates through several interconnected mechanisms that address different aspects of spiritual imbalance. First, the ritual offerings serve as communication vehicles that carry specific messages to relevant spiritual entities, requesting their intervention in human affairs. These communications follow precise protocols that ensure the messages reach their intended recipients and convey the appropriate requests for assistance. Second, Igbo practices work to cleanse and purify the spiritual atmosphere surrounding individuals, removing negative influences and creating space for positive spiritual forces to operate. This cleansing function operates similarly to physical cleansing, but addresses spiritual rather than material contamination. The ritual elements used in Igbo possess specific spiritual properties that neutralize negative forces and attract beneficial ones. Third, the ceremonial aspects of Igbo serve to realign individuals with their spiritual destiny and purpose, removing obstacles that block the natural flow of their life force and opportunity. This realignment function addresses the root causes of spiritual problems rather than merely treating symptoms, ensuring more lasting and comprehensive healing. The participatory aspect of Igbo also plays a crucial role in its effectiveness. By actively engaging in the ritual process, individuals demonstrate their commitment to spiritual healing and change, creating psychological and spiritual conditions that support the transformation process. This active participation helps individuals internalize the spiritual shifts initiated by the ritual work. Traditional understanding recognizes that Igbo works most effectively when performed with proper knowledge, respect, and spiritual authority. The complexity of spiritual forces involved requires practitioners with extensive training and experience to ensure that the ritual work achieves its intended effects without creating unintended consequences. Chapter 10. Preparation and spiritual readiness for Igbo proper. Preparation for Igbo involves both practical arrangements and spiritual conditioning that enhance the effectiveness of the ritual intervention. Traditional Yoruba protocols, as preserved in the training systems documented by researchers like Margaret Drewell, emphasize that the participant's spiritual state significantly influences the success of the ceremonial. Spiritual preparation typically begins with a period of reflection and purification, designed to create appropriate mental and emotional conditions for receiving spiritual assistance. This preparation involves honest self-examination to identify personal contributions to the spiritual imbalance, sincere repentance for actions that may have contributed to the problem, and genuine commitment to making necessary life changes following the ritual. The purification process often includes dietary restrictions, periods of celibacy, and avoidance of certain activities or substances that could interfere with spiritual sensitivity. These temporary restrictions serve to cleanse the body and mind, creating optimal conditions for spiritual communication and transformation during the Igbo ceremony. Mental preparation involves developing clear intentions and specific goals for the ritual. Participants must identify exactly what changes they seek, what obstacles they want removed, and what positive outcomes they desire to manifest. This clarity of intention helps focus the spiritual forces activated by the Igbo towards specific objectives, rather than general improvement. Emotional preparation requires cultivating attitudes of humility, gratitude, and respect toward the spiritual forces being invoked for assistance. Traditional wisdom recognizes that spiritual entities respond more favorably to individuals who approach them with proper reverence and appreciation, rather than demanding or entitled attitudes. The gathering of required ritual material also forms part of the preparation process. Each element used in Igbo possesses specific spiritual properties and symbolic meanings that contribute to the overall effectiveness of the work. Understanding the significance of these materials helps participants appreciate the sophistication of the spiritual technology they're employing. Chapter 11. Working with qualified practitioners. The complexity and power of Igbo practices require guidance from qualified spiritual practitioners who possess the knowledge, experience, and spiritual authority necessary to perform these rituals safely and effectively. Traditional Yoruba training systems, as documented by scholars like John Mason and Judith Gleason, involve years of intensive study and initiation designed to prepare practitioners for this important responsibility. Qualified practitioners typically demonstrate several key characteristics that distinguish them from those with superficial knowledge or questionable credentials. They possess extensive knowledge of traditional protocols, understand the spiritual forces involved in different types of Igbo, and have received proper initiation and training within authentic lineage. Their knowledge extends beyond ritual mechanics to include spiritual diagnosis, divination skills, and understanding of the broader context within which specific problems occur. Authentic practitioners also demonstrate ethical standards and spiritual maturity that ensure they use their knowledge responsibly and in the best interests of those seeking their assistance. They typically refuse to perform harmful work, insist on proper preparation and follow-up, and maintain confidentiality regarding their clients' spiritual work. Their primary motivation involves serving the spiritual needs of their community rather than personal profit or power. The relationship between practitioners and those seeking Igbo should be characterized by mutual respect, clear communication, and shared commitment to achieving positive spiritual outcomes. Qualified practitioners take time to understand their clients' situations thoroughly, explain the spiritual dynamics involved, and provide guidance for maintaining the benefits achieved through ritual work. Traditional training emphasizes that practitioners must continue their own spiritual development throughout their careers, regularly receiving additional training, participating in community ceremonies, and maintaining their own spiritual practices. This ongoing development ensures that their knowledge remains current and their spiritual authority continues to grow. The selection of appropriate practitioners requires careful consideration and often involves seeking recommendations from trusted sources within established spiritual communities. The importance of this decision cannot be overstated, as working with unqualified or unethical practitioners can worsen spiritual problems rather than resolving them. Chapter 12. Post-Igbo, Integration and Lifestyle Changes. The period following Igbo ceremonies requires careful attention to integration and lifestyle changes that support and maintain the spiritual shifts initiated by the ritual. Traditional Yoruba understanding, as documented in the ethnographic studies of researchers like Robert Farris Thompson, emphasizes that lasting transformation requires ongoing commitment beyond the ceremonial. Integration begins with observing specific post-ritual protocols designed to protect and stabilize the spiritual changes achieved through Igbo. These protocols often include temporary restrictions on certain activities, dietary guidelines, and behavioral modifications that prevent interference with the delicate spiritual processes set in motion by the ceremony. Following these guidelines carefully helps ensure that the benefits of the ritual become permanently established. Lifestyle changes that support spiritual health typically involve adopting practices that maintain spiritual protection and positive energy. These may include regular spiritual hygiene practices, prayers or meditation appropriate to Yoruba tradition, and mindful attention to the spiritual quality of one's environment and associations. Such practices help individuals remain aligned with the positive spiritual forces activated during Ebo. The importance of gratitude and ongoing relationship with spiritual forces cannot be overstated in the post-Ebo period. Traditional wisdom emphasizes that the benefits received through spiritual intervention create obligations for continued respect, appreciation, and appropriate offerings. Maintaining these spiritual relationships helps ensure continued protection and support. Monitoring and maintaining the results achieved through Ebo requires developing sensitivity to spiritual conditions and early warning signs that might indicate the need for additional spiritual work. This sensitivity develops through experience and continued spiritual education, helping individuals become more proactive in maintaining their spiritual health. The integration period also provides opportunities for deeper spiritual development and understanding. Many individuals find that successful Ebo experiences awaken greater interest in Yoruba spirituality and desire for ongoing spiritual education. This expanded awareness can lead to richer spiritual life and greater ability to navigate future challenges. Chapter 13. Embracing Yoruba. Wisdom for spiritual balance. The journey through understanding the 5 signs that indicate the need for spiritual Ebo represents more than mere problem-solving. It opens doorways to profound spiritual wisdom that has sustained communities for thousands of years. Traditional Yoruba spirituality offers a comprehensive worldview that recognizes the fundamental interconnectedness of all existence and provides practical tools for maintaining harmony within this complex web of relationships. Embracing this wisdom requires recognizing that spiritual health forms the foundation for all other aspects of well-being. Physical health, emotional balance, successful relationships, and material prosperity all depend upon maintaining proper spiritual alignment and protection. This understanding shifts perspective from reactive crisis management to proactive spiritual maintenance and development. The 5 signs we have explored serve as an early warning system that allows individuals to address spiritual imbalances before they create serious life disruption. By learning to recognize these patterns and respond appropriately, we can prevent many problems and maintain more stable, fulfilling lives. This preventive approach aligns with traditional Yoruba emphasis on wisdom and foresight. Modern life often disconnects us from the spiritual awareness that our ancestors took for granted, yet the spiritual laws governing human existence remain unchanged. Reconnecting with this wisdom requires patience, humility, and willingness to expand our understanding beyond purely materialistic worldviews. The benefits of this expansion extend far beyond problem-solving to encompass spiritual growth and deeper life satisfaction. The practice of Ebo, properly understood and implemented, represents participation in an ancient tradition of spiritual sophistication that offers profound resources for navigating contemporary challenges. These resources become increasingly valuable as modern life presents new forms of stress and spiritual disruption that require traditional wisdom applied to contemporary circumstances. As we conclude this exploration, remember that spiritual development is a lifelong journey rather than a destination. The wisdom of Yoruba tradition provides reliable guidance for this journey, but each individual must walk their own path with sincerity, respect, and commitment. May this knowledge serve you well in recognizing when spiritual intervention becomes necessary and in finding qualified guidance for your spiritual needs.